Welcome, listener, to the Coriel Ortho podcast with me, Tony Wilkinson, consultant podiatric surgeon, foot surgery expert, and founding director of Coriel Orthopedic Group. Now, this is a podcast where we delve into everything medical, surgical, and health and well-being related. Now, today, I've not just got one guest, but I've got three, and we're going to delve into the world of ultra running, something that I really struggle to get my head around, really, in terms of distances and how people psych themselves up for this. But we're also going to answer some questions about gait analysis, trainer design, because there are so many different running shoes on the market, to try and understand what a good running shoe is. Now, my first guest is Adrian Hopkinson, who is an ultra runner, and he played football up into his 30s, but then got an ACL injury and was actually told that he wouldn't be able to run long distances. But since then, he's got into ultra running, and he's now going to run the Land's End to John O'Groats in the quickest possible time. Now, he's trying to raise 100k for the Alzheimer Society, so let's wish him luck on that. Welcome, Adrian.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Now, my second guest is a legend in the podiatry world, Trevor Prior. Now, I've known Trevor for years. He's a consultant podiatric surgeon. He's an expert in sports medicine and gait analysis, and he's going to give us a wealth of experience. He's been involved in think tanks setting up running shoe design. He's set up university courses in sports medicine. So a real expert and someone we're really lucky to have with us today. Welcome, Trevor.
Thanks for having me.
And last but not least, we've got Joe, who trades under the name of the Lakes Orthotics. Now, Joe works with us in our clinic at Coriel Orthopedic Group, and she's been an orthotist for around 20 years, initially working in the NHS, but latterly she's been working in private practice. And to be fair, you don't really find many orthotists that you can see privately. Most of them are on NHS, and you end up waiting years sometimes to get some decent orthotics. But I really want to delve into what drives her in orthotic prescription, and look at some of the treatments that she provides and link that in with the ultra running. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you for having me.
So let's kick it off then. I mean, Adrian, I really struggle. I mean, I'm quite a fit guy, really. I like to think of myself as a bit of a fitness fanatic, and I do a little bit of running. I kind of do the 5k, the 10k, and I think when you speak to the average person, that's kind of the level of running that they would do. And I know a couple of people who do ultra running. There's a guy called Ronnie Staten. I don't know if you've ever come across him, who runs under the brand Hobo Pace.
Yeah.
And he basically, when he tells me some of the stuff he does, 80 miles, 150 miles, it absolutely blows my mind. So how do you psych yourself up for that sort of level of endurance? And how do you prepare for that fitness-wise?
Fitness-wise, you've got to start small. I've been doing this a while now, so going out there doing 70-mile weeks is not a big thing, but stepping it up to 150-mile weeks, 170-mile weeks, so you go up in stages. But like I've said to everybody who's asked me that question, it's more about training the mind, because I always say the body can pretty much withstand anything, but you'll get to a stage where your mind will just had enough of it. So a lot of mental training more than physical training.
Yeah. So you did that playing football, your ACL.
Yeah.
So what happened? You a bad tackle and it ruptured?
No, it's a lot more embarrassing than that. So all they did is play ball down the line, and I heard this like pop noise, and then and I'm thinking that didn't sound good, because it felt like it did like bent backwards. Yeah. So everybody went, that gasper. Yeah. Like everybody did that on the side of the pitch. I thought, this is not a good thing.
Yeah. And you had surgery on it, I take it.
Yeah. So I went to the Thornbury actually.
Right. Okay.
Derek Bickerstaff.
Derek. Yeah.
So surgery after 6 months after the injury, because I was waiting on the NHS for a while before I realised that I was actually private. So as soon as I got in private, sorted it out. So from injury till full recovery, talking about 18 months.
So it was Derek that told you you'd never run long distances?
Yeah.
Right. So you went in, so to get over that, what did you just think? Oh, well, I'm not listening to what he says, I'm just going to do it.
Well,
what happened? It's
a bit of a process, really, because I was just wanted to play football again. That was the first goal. And I met a physio, White House physio.
Yeah.
And after Derek told me that, I was a bit gutted, because you don't know what the future's going to look like, and it wasn't really on my roadmap at that point to get into running. So in between the two surgeries, so I did the ACL, and then I had it repaired and stitched up, the meniscus.
Yeah.
That eventually tore. They call it bucket handle tear.
Yeah.
completely through. So, and the second surgery, I had it completely removed 50%
Right,
of it.
so you've had the whole meniscus taken out.
Yeah, and in between that, I actually ran my first half marathon.
Right.
So I did a 4-mile run and 8-mile run, and I figured out I couldn't run anymore. And I'd signed up to this, started raising a bit of money, and I felt pressured into doing it. So I did my first ever half marathon in between.
Yeah.
And I can't say I got the bug for it then, because I'm never going to do this again. I'm never running long distance again.
Yeah.
But to be told, it's a little bit like dangling the carrot into it.
Yeah.
So if somebody tells me I can't do something, I'm like, that sounds
it.
like a challenge. Yeah.
So you got into triathlons.
Yeah.
And you did the Ironman. And Ironman, I mean, that's what is a marathon, 2-mile swim, and a 120-mile bike ride or something.
Yeah. So you start with the 2.4 mile
right.
Swim, and then you move on. You do a 112-mile bike ride.
112, okay.
And then just a short marathon at the end.
Yes, I mean that's some endurance. Was that how did you swap from doing the kind of triathlon just into pure running? Did you not enjoy the other disciplines, or is it you just found running better for you?
I really struggled with swimming. I didn't start swimming until in my 30s, like properly. Like I didn't even realize you had to put your head in the water, completely. I was like, they call it polo swimming, don't you? When you play water polo. Yeah. So I did that. I really struggled with the swimming side of it. I mean, like a lot of anxiety around being in the water, cold water. I really struggled with it, but I set the benchmark as I want to do an Ironman. Yeah. From my first ever try to Ironman was within a year. And even though I did a half the week before the full one, just to make it even more harder for myself, I didn't feel like I met my physical or mental limits at that point.
Okay, so you wanted to push it that bit further. So how did you come up with the Land's End to John O'Groats? What's that all about? You obviously said you wanted to raise money for Alzheimer's. So what's the connection with Alzheimer's? And are you trying to do that for a record? Do you want to be the fastest person? Is it a Guinness record? Is it what are you trying to achieve?
So the idea was, so I did another half. So half was always my distance in try, and I think 6 days later, I'd signed up to do a backyard ultra. Right. That was my first ever ultra. And my aim was to do 100 miles. 6 days off a half takes people normally about 4 weeks to recover, so I saw. Did that. And I went through a lot of like emotions because it rained for like 17 hours. Yeah. And I figured that, I've got a bit more in them than just 100 miles. So that's how I progressed on to really want to get into the ultras. And I think a bit of Hardest Geezer and what he'd done Africa, and then talks of Australia, and then I'll figure, well, where shall I start? Let's start on the island, and then if things go well, we'll progress it and look at the next thing, which could be Australia, could be Africa, but you've got to find your challenge within the parameters of where you can start, really. Yeah. The Alzheimer's thing, I did my first ever fundraiser when I did my half, and that's why I felt a bit like pressure on myself to do it. My wife's granddad suffered from the Alzheimer, from Alzheimer's or dementia.
Family connection there, then.
Yeah, and I'm quite fortunate because I've not been anybody in my family's not had the disease, and that's why I'm really fortunate. Yeah, but her granddad died shortly before I met her, and she was impacted by it for years, telling the stories. And I figured I wanted to impress her at the time. I'll do that, and your granddad's on. Did the half, and I'm like, well, I'm never running again. And then obviously, so we want to improve the distance as far as we can go. But the biggest challenge is to raise £100,000 for the Alzheimer's Society, because that's a news story. We have looked at the Guinness World Record, which is quite costly, and it's also an old long story. We haven't got 3-hour podcast booked in it, but it's a long story. But it is desirable, but I don't know where we're at with that at the moment.
Right. Okay. Well, good luck with that. I'm sure hopefully we'll be able to get to that target for you. So in terms of injury, then you did your ACL, but obviously as runners get injured all the time. And what other injuries have you had? You must have had some doing these distances.
Yeah, I mean, early stages, because people go through the motions where you start running 5K, 10Ks and stuff like that. I got a lot of hip injuries and hip flexor injuries, and then IT band, and then just recently, which came and see you.
Yeah, with your Achilles.
It was the Achilles, and that was a really long recovery process.
Yeah.
I did start to question whether I would be able to do this at all, because it did.
Right.
didn't even.
So when did your Achilles kick off? Because what happened with that is that you did message me at one time about your Achilles, and then you went to the running show, and I think you saw Trevor there at the running show, and Trevor had a look at you on the stand and said. He messaged me and said, Adrian's got quite a big swollen Achilles. Can you have a look at him? And you came down and you saw me, and we did an ultrasound scan. So he's obviously been grumbling on for a little while. And when you saw me, it wasn't as swollen at all. So it had gone down. Unfortunately, your ultrasound scan was okay. But that's been a grumbling problem, has it?
Yeah. So it started, and I don't know the science behind this, but I'd done a lot of like steady recovery sort of pace runs. And then I just thought, just before Christmas, I'll give this 10K run a bit of an effort.
Yeah.
And it was like the worst thing I could do because
it
triggered it. But it's funny because, when you say you go to doctors, you wait that long to see somebody. By the time you've seen them, it's healed itself. I saw Trevor, and you was concerned, right, that it was in a bad way. And then a week later, it's disappeared. I'm thinking, I reckon these guys must think I'm going crazy because there's nothing there now.
Yeah. Well, certainly you don't wait that long to come to the Coriel clinic, so you can book in and be seen on the same day if you really want to. So Trevor, we've done a gait analysis today on Adrian, and we've had a look at what's going on when he's running using the Run 3D gait analysis system, which is quite a high-tech piece of kit. And you're a director of the company, and you promote this around the company. There's a number of practitioners. I mean, Joe, you use the Run 3D locally. So what did you find when we did the analysis on him?
Yeah, really interesting, actually. Just as a bit of background, so the Run 3D, the way a foot works is a combination of what a foot can do and what the body asks it to do. So if you do a squat on both legs, you feel certain pressures, certain positions. If you do it on one leg, it all changes. Well, your foot function's not changed, but what your body's asked it to do has changed. So we can look at foot and leg function in a couple of ways. What the Run 3D system is a bit like when you animate in Hollywood, you use markers. So we can track the pelvis, hips, knees and ankles in 3 body planes with infrared cameras. And we take the individual's results and compare it to an uninjured control group to see if we can pick up any features that may be predisposing to injury, etc. And we also use a pressure system that goes inside the shoe, and that's our kind of window inside the shoe. So the 3D tells us what the body's asking the foot to do.
Right.
The pressure tells us what the foot's doing.
So you used a foot plate today, the PDAR system, which was an in-shoe. It was an in-shoe pressure system.
We used two. We used a pressure plate. Joe's got a pressure plate because we wanted to see what it looked outside the shoe. But then we have insoles that have the pressure sensors in that go inside the shoe, so we can see the interaction of the foot inside the shoe.
Because you need to be barefoot just to use the pressure plate, really, wouldn't you?
Yeah, the problem with using a plate with a shoe is that the sole of the shoe kind of smooths it all out. Okay. But it does give us an idea about some of the interaction of the shoe, and so we were collecting all of that data. And Adrian's data is really interesting, actually. So there's this kind of myth about pronation.
Yes.
Adrian's
got... If you go to a running shop, what's the first thing they say to you? Oh, you're over-pronate. Well, everybody over-pronates to a certain extent.
Well, everybody pronates because it's normal, right? So you should pronate to an extent. And Adrian would be classed as having a pronated foot type on a static scale of 0 to 12. He's an 8, so that's in the pronated in a population. He runs ultra marathons with no orthoses. Yeah. Right. So it goes to show you can have a pronated foot and be absolutely fine. But he's obviously had this problem with the Achilles. Now, to give a bit of background, you talked about the ACL, and we know that if you have an ACL repair, it's never going to allow the knee to function as well as it can. So if we break it down into a nutshell, his overall running style, he has a short step length, but because of that, he has high vertical excursion. That means that he's going up and down more than the average person, right? So it takes more energy to get up, and there's more force when you come down. When we look at the individual values, because of that short step, he doesn't get a lot of knee flexion. Yeah. And it's less on the right side, which was his injured knee. And as a result, he gets less ankle dorsiflexion on the right side. When we go and look inside the shoe, in some of the shoes where he gets a normal heel to toe strike, we see that the right foot strikes a bit further forward because of that limited motion. In some of the other shoes, because of the geometry of the shoe, because he contacts further forward, it looks more level. But in those shoes, he comes in a bit more. Yeah. And then on the left hip, we can see that there's reduced control. And we can see how it changes between the shoes. So what's really interesting for me is I think he has a natural running style that's short, which means he gets reduced flexion. There's more limitation on the right side, probably because of the knee rather than the ankle, but it means that the ankle's not functioning as much. That will be a direct load onto the Achilles. So we were chatting before, and do you know what I would simply do is I'd just give him a couple of 3 mil heel lifts,
right? Okay.
Because it will probably just allow that heel
so
contact.
You're not worried about controlling the pronation.
No, the pronation is not an issue, right? And we can see the difference between the two shoes, or two or three shoes that change that loading, and also. He's able to run 70 miles.
Yeah.
Right. You introduce an orthoses that all the research shows us that there was a study that looked at 8 people and they gave them 5 orthoses, all designed to do the same thing, limit pronation. And everybody responded to each orthoses differently. Some of them made them pronate more.
Yeah.
And the reality is that because of that jigsaw puzzle of the foot, the ankle, knee, hip, everybody's going to respond differently to an orthotic or a shoe. And you can't predict where in the chain they're going to respond. Yeah. So we could stick an orthoses in just because he's got a pronated foot, and it just puts load somewhere else. Right. So we have to be really careful. He has a specific injury, the Achilles injury. We can see a sagittal plane reason why that may happen. Yeah. There's a very simple solution to it, and that's just a very small heel lift. That should be sufficient.
Right, okay. So is pronation still a big thing, Joe, in terms of runners? You get a lot of people coming into your practice obsessed with pronation, and how do you deal with that? What's your take on it?
I do. It's kind of like the evil of the foot pronation, and I have to educate everybody that comes in to say the foot is supposed to pronate. It's also supposed to supinate. It's a natural part of the gait. And when people come to me and they want orthotics, they think it's because they want me to stop them from pronating.
Yes, so take it away, basically.
Yeah, but we don't want to stop the pronating. What we want to do is to control and not support. That's not what the insoles are for. A lot of people think that insoles are there to support the arch and to stop that pronation. That's absolutely not.
I mean, you see these pictures in magazines, don't you, where someone's got a flat foot and they stand on an insole and suddenly the foot is completely rectus, and what we would say in old money as neutral. I know we've kind of gone away from that as a concept, but in reality, if somebody who comes into my practice, they stand on an orthotic with flat feet, they've still got a flat foot when they stand on the orthotic. So what's the orthotic doing? How does it work?
So like I say, it's not supporting the arch. What we're really doing is changing forces. So we're looking at the forces and how they're being applied to the tissues in the body, and it's that we're trying to change. So the orthotics are changing those forces, changing how the load is being applied to the tissues, and that's how we're getting the pain relief or the reduction in the symptoms.
So if someone comes to you and says, well, I've had a gait analysis, I've been to the running shop, what are the running shops doing that's different to what you're doing? Are they doing a gait analysis? Are they just watching them run on a treadmill? What's the difference?
Generally, they're just watching them run on a treadmill, and they are literally just looking at pronation and supination.
Purely looking at pronation.
Yeah, that's all they're looking at. And the whole, you're pronating, so you need an anti-pronation shoe. I mean, it's nonsense in my opinion.
I suppose that is the difficulty. I mean, one of the difficulties I've always had with orthotics is it's only ever as good as the end user says it is. So, you can come up with the best design of an orthotic. And I was telling you the story earlier that I had a guy that I gave, an expensive prescription orthotic. And when he came back, he had a piece of shag pile carpet in his shoe and said it felt a lot better. And I felt absolutely soul destroyed by that. It was like, really? But it is the problem that sometimes it can be down to the material, how much that material engages with the foot, the pressures that it puts through it. Because really what we're doing is slowing down the movement, aren't we?
We are slowing down movements. Yeah, it's we need, like I say, we need to allow that pronation to happen, because when the foot pronates, there's a whole sort of cycle of events that happens throughout the body. So we need to allow that to happen. But it is about slowing it down and controlling it a little bit so that the stresses on the tissues are either limited or or improved.
Yeah, and the footwear's important, right? So I mean, Adrian, you've been doing running now for a while. You came in with a bag of shoes. My heart always sinks when patients come in with a bag of something. 25 different pairs of shoes, and now you've got to kind of work out what's right and what's wrong. I suppose this is where the 3D gait analysis comes in, because it can help you to more explain that. So what's your thought on a running shoe? For you, what's a good running shoe in your mind?
It obviously depends on the race and the outcome you want from the race.
So you're using different types for different races.
Yeah. So I'll give you. So I've got Boston Marathon coming up. I want to get a decent time. I want to run the fastest I can within that distance. So I would tend to go with a fast racing carbon shoe for that. But for training, I think you can. So
a carbon soled kind of shoe, is that what you're talking about? Does it actually make you faster then?
Yeah.
Do you feel it makes you
100%.
faster?
So if you go off heart rate data alone, I can perceive the same amount of effort.
Yeah.
But I'm going 5% faster without doing anything differently.
Okay.
And I mean, Trevor will tell you better than I can, but it seems like you're getting a bit of a kickback and a bit of a.
Yeah. Is that cheating?
Ask the pros. Do the pros cheat?
Yeah. Well, that's the dilemma, isn't it? I mean, I believe, Trevor, that some of the running shoes they were banned or they weren't allowed to be used.
No. What they did was that when Nike brought out the 4% because of the stack height and stuff like that, and people started saying, "Oh, is it cheating?" They brought in some regulations that you can have a maximum stack height to try and gauge it, and they also said that you can only compete in a shoe that's available to the public.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So in other words, you can't race in a prototype shoe that no one's got access to.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to bring in some minor guidelines.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, you've been involved in think tanks with running shoes. I know you're director of Vimazzi, which is a brand new running shoe that's biomechanically designed that we'll come on to. But in your mind, what makes a good running shoe? I mean, people come into me and they'll ask me that question. And I sometimes feel a little bit overwhelmed by it because I'm not as an expert as you guys in the actual running shoe. What makes a good running shoe? What are we looking for? What's different about Vimazzi?
Well, there's a million questions there. Firstly, I think it's fair to say to the running shoe stores. So the classic bit where you run on a treadmill, they look at the angle that the shoe makes and they compare some shoes and go with a straighter alignment. You know, back in the day, I used to do that. That was part of my assessment. I'd use the in-shoe as well. And we'd look at that because our concepts, as you'll be aware, was that pronation was this evil and that we had to get everybody doing a certain thing. And only in 2009, there was a paper in the British Journal of Sports Medicine that questioned that approach that long ago. And we do criticise the running shoe stores for what they do, but no one's given them an alternative. Yeah. So if they've been using something for 10 years and they get a degree of success with it and you give them no other way to do it, what are they going to do? I mean, my problem comes when I say you need a gait analysis. I've already had one. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right. Well, let's have a look at that.
But
also you got to look at the way shoes have changed. So because we had that belief, then you had shoes that were made to be a kind of neutral shoe. So it just had some cushioning features to it. So in that shoe, we would probably use for someone that had a relatively neutral or higher arch foot type. Yeah. Then you had your stability shoes, right? They had a little bit more firmness to them. They often had dual density at the rear foot, so the medial aspect was stiffer than the lateral aspect to try and control some of that movement. And we put someone who pronated a bit into that. And then you had stability shoes that kicked it up a level. So you had those things. Now, if you look, people still talk in those criteria. But the shoes that there are today are nothing like the shoes. You can't really get a proper stability shoe like we used to talk to. And actually, I like them when you look at shoes. I think they've kind of gone like cars did a few years ago. You know, when they all started looking the same?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? They're all kind of looking the same, a little bit of geometry here, a bit of geometry there. And we don't often think about the geometry of a shoe. I mean, we had a patient that loved one of the first carbon fiber shoes, absolutely loved it. Got the next version, couldn't get on with it at all. And when we looked at it on the 3D, we could see in that second shoe, she lost hip control. So the geometry of that shoe did not work for her. Yeah. And people often don't think about that. So I think if you're advising someone that's got no problems whatsoever, it's completely different to advising a patient. Yeah. So would I change someone's shoe who's comfortable running in a good shoe? They can run as far as they want and they have no problems. Oh, no, why would I change that? Because they're happy. That all works together. If they start to look at other shoes, I might often say, well, what I would do is get 4 or 5 shoes, work your way down to the one that's most comfortable, because there's some evidence that comfort goes with function.
So buy 4 or 5 pairs.
No. Try them on in a good running shoe store and go.
And go on to the. You've obviously got to go on the treadmill, I suppose.
Yeah, or there are a couple of stores actually let you run outside.
Right. Okay.
If you've got someone who's injured, that's different. We're now looking for features of the shoe. So for someone like Adrian, we might be looking at a shoe that has a slightly bigger heel to toe drop. right? We might, in somebody else, we might look at the body weight and say, well, you don't need as heavy a shoe as somebody that's bigger than you. We might look at something and say, well, actually, that's really low and it's very flexible. That might not be great for you, Yeah. So I think you kind of look at principles of shoes and then say, you can go and then try those principles of shoes.
Okay.
But it's really hard to get consistency across the shoes because how much has changed of late.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I got to, as you said, I've been involved in a few think tanks, and I got asked to be involved in the Vermazi think tank, and it was just took a different approach. The founder of the company is a physicist by background.
Right. Okay.
And
coming from a real scientific background.
Yeah. Although he's got sort of 30 odd years of experience in the running shoe business, so he didn't just come to running shoes. He's got a lot of last design and stuff like that. And he actually looked at a lot of the maths and the physics behind it. And actually, well, we've been thinking about running in the wrong way because we talk about this spring model.
Yeah.
And it's not a spring, right? The body can't function like a spring. And so when he looked at the maths, he's saying, well, if we look at impact and propulsive forces, so when we hit the ground, it's impact. When we push off, it's propulsive.
Yeah.
They're actually two different forces. And the way you can think of that is if you imagine you were running barefoot and you're on sand or firm grass, well, you'd rather land on the sand because it gives a bit, but push off the grass because it's stable, because pushing off sand's hard work. Well, they're two different densities. Therefore, when we wear a shoe that's got the same foam all the way through, it's the same density, but there's two different forces. So the first concept was, well, make a shoe where the heel's softer than the forefoot, so you get the benefit of impact, but the stability of push off. But if you and I are running, we generate different forces.
Yeah.
So using the same foam density doesn't necessarily make sense.
Right.
So if you've got one shoe with one foam for everybody, does that make sense? Probably not. So each model has different densities. And then using the mass behind it, we can do a calculation and say, well, actually, for the forces you generate, that's probably the best shoe for you.
Right.
But rather like dosing a drug. So if you had hypertension, we'd say, this way, we'll give you this dose. We see how you respond. And so, well, actually, we might need to tighter that. So if you're someone that likes a softer run or a harder run, you might say that's the one for you. Actually, that feels a bit soft. Well, we'll just change the model because we can give you a firmer one. So now you can put a little bit of science behind the background. And that, the final bit for me that got it, I sort of said to him, sorry, explain to me how you control pronation with a flat shoe. Yeah. Because, we came from the background of angles and dangles. He said, well, it's easy.
Wedge. Yeah.
It's easy. When you hit the ground, you've got a soft material that slows down the pronation. But as you get into that propulsive phase, if the materials are soft, you just carry on going. Yeah. Whereas if you put a firmer material, it stabilizes the foot and it gives you that frontal plane. I'm like, wow. Okay. So then proof's in the pudding. So I've worn orthotics for years. Yeah. I don't have to wear orthotics.
So Joe, that must be a bit worrying to an orthotist. So what Trevor's basically telling me is that the shoe design is almost replacing the need for an orthotic. What's your take on that then?
Yes and no. I mean, my sort of practice has changed quite a lot since I've got involved in Run 3D, because and the Vermazi shoes as well. Because I'm looking at things in a slightly different way. With orthotics traditionally, it was all about, trying to control things with a device, whereas we can do it with our own body if we're sort of applying the forces in the right way. Yeah. It does kind of, it does make my practice a little bit more tricky because I'm trying to,
it's evolving, right?
It is evolving. It's constantly evolving. And, in the years that I've been an orthotist, things have changed so much and we've gone away from some of the theories that we had in the beginning. And again, it's about allowing the pronation and things like you were talking about, but controlling it as well. Using the choice of materials.
I think it's fair to say that we're not saying orthoses have no role. Yeah. And I'm not saying you don't necessarily need to use an orthosis in this shoe because you're always going to get extremes. Yeah. Right. So you get examples. I think the other thing, and kind of what Joe's alluding to there, is that we can change the load on your foot by giving you a really good rehab program and doing a bit of gait retraining and stuff like that. And that sometimes that's the best thing. But let's just say you're Joe or Joette blogs who's got this level of biomechanics and wants to perform to this level, but actually has to rehab to this level, okay? But you haven't got the time. or the inclination or the mental willpower.
Yeah.
So you only rehab to here.
Yeah.
Orthosis may fill a bit of that gap, but you also have to accept that if you're going to perform at that level, you may well get injured.
Yeah.
So either accept you're going to get injured or change your goal.
Right.
So it's, just going out for a run. I'm sure Adrian will tell you, you go out for a run one day, you plan to going to do a 10 miler relatively quick, you're not feeling it.
Yeah.
Right. Just something that you wake up, you're a bit stiff, you're not feeling it, but you're daft to do it. Right. Yeah. So there's so much more.
But they do. I mean, ultra runners, like you said, you'll push through injury and you'll get out there and keep going. What's your take? You've tried the Vimaz issues then. You've obviously tried a lot. What's your take on them as an end user?
Yeah, I think they're really catered for the long distance stuff.
Okay.
Like I've spoke to Trevor about it, what my feelings about the fast version of it. But all what matters to me is if I'm in him for long periods, I need him to be fairly stable. A lot of heel support's great because I've had this most recent injury. But I want to be extremely comfortable. I don't want to be worrying about blisters. I don't want to be worrying about any sort of injuries it could cause me by being in there for long periods, you see. I especially like the trails. I can't speak any highly of them because it's very rare you get a comfortable, soft trail trainer. They're no as hard on the bottom. You can feel every pebble, every stone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's where they come into their own. It's just like the attention to details with the cushioning on the tongue. Because
do you like the cushioning then in the heel? Is that important to you as a runner?
I didn't think it were until I tried them.
Right.
But now I do because I know having that support, especially when you're cornering, you're doing trail and you're doing some sort of technical run if you like, or even going over to park run where it's trailer where you know you're going to corner. I started pining for them. So I put my night ones on and I'm thinking, I've definitely made the wrong trainer choice here. Yeah. And that's the first time I've ever done that in my career, where I actually thought the run would be better in the masses.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, what about the flat earthers of the running world? The people who like to go barefoot runners? Because you're telling me that the shoe, it's got to have good cushioning at the heel and then some support in the midfoot to control some of the motion. How does that work with these barefoot shoes and that idea? What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, well, let's go from two angles. Firstly, the really important force when you're running is your propulsive force, so the forefoot force.
So when you're going off on your toes and going forward.
Yeah. So the first thing you say is you generate this amount of force underneath your forefoot, so that for you, this is the density of material you need. So now we can work out how soft we can make it at the back and therefore the density at the rear foot. So because the shoes are really designed for the propulsive bit, it doesn't matter if you spend a bit more time on the ball of your foot because it's still designed for the force that you generate. It's just you don't get the benefit of the rear foot because you don't get rear foot strike. Let's now go back to forefoot runners, flat runners. So the concept was if you look at a force time curve, you get this little blip at the first bit because of the way the body loads. When you run on a forefoot, you lose that blip.
So people talk about the heel strike run or the mid strike run on the forefoot. And I've seen clips of videos where, trainers have said, you need to move from doing a heel strike into a forefoot. You should run on your toes. How do you determine how someone should run? What's the best style?
So firstly, it's a spectrum.
Right.
So you don't just this and this. So when we looked at Adrian in some of the shoes, he's got a heel strike, but it's a little bit further forward. It's not pure heel.
Okay.
And if we look at that center of pressure line about where it contacts, that gives us a really good idea. So we get some people that contact a bit further forward, maybe in the midfoot. You get other people that will contact at the forefoot and actually the load drops back down and then goes forward again. In some people, the heel will contact the ground. In other people, it won't. That's a true forefoot runner.
Right.
Okay. So it's a spectrum. It's not one point.
Yeah.
Secondly, So the idea where you lose that little spike was that because you do that, you don't get the injuries. Therefore, you must run on your forefoot, right? Because you're not going to get injuries. Well, we know from the physics that when you run, you generate a certain amount of force, which you can't lose.
Yeah.
So when you run on a heel strike and you run on a forefoot, you still get the force, but you just load different tissues.
Okay.
So you get different injuries.
Right.
So like metatarsal stress fractures, calf Achilles problems, etc., which is why one of the companies come a bit unstuck in the States.
Right. Okay.
All right. So that's a really important factor. When they've looked at, say, the Boston Marathon top 100 finishers, they all heel strike.
Okay.
So it's a very natural process to do. me personally, if someone comes to see me and they say, I'm a 4-foot runner, I want to do X, Y, and Z, I have no problem with that. I don't tell them they have to change anything. But if they've got a problem, we look and we try and work out why.
Yeah.
Right. And they say, okay, well, you realize it's this. I have a patient who's got first MTPJ pain.
Yeah.
Someone's told him he's got a bit of arthritis.
Yeah. So in his big toe joint. Yeah.
Yeah. But, you would look at that and go, I'd be happy with that if that was my toe joint.
Yeah.
But he's in pain. He can't get out of his pain. But he's a 4-foot striker, a 4-foot runner. So he's running with his first MTPJ dorsiflex all the way through.
Yeah.
And I'm going, well, that's why you've got your pain. If you're going to carry on running like that, I'm not sure there's anything that we can do to help you.
Yeah.
So it's a bit about making people understand. You know, when you look at, even if they're a heel striker and you look at the back of the shoe and what it's doing, that doesn't mean the foot's doing that inside the shoe. There's some of the top runners in the world. You watch them running around a bend and the shoe looks like it's at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
The shoe's moving, not the foot.
Right. Okay.
We had a patient who, if you looked at the two at mid stance, the two heels are in contact with the ground and the symptomatic side is more everted. And we could show with, it was right-sided problems with the Run 3D, that she had lack of control on the right side. When we looked inside the shoe with the pedal, she had a heel strike on the left. She was a 4-foot striker with no heel contact on the right. Yeah. She had no idea that she was running like that.
Right.
So she can't control the right side.
Okay.
So she got to change the way she runs.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So Adrian, so what's your game plan then for this Land's End to John O'Groats? So how far are you running each day, and what sort of time scale are you going to do this over?
So we're looking at 2 week to completion, which averages
14 days.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So averages out between 60 and 80 miles a day. Some days will be just the short end of that, 60, and then some days, on average, I think it's 70 per day. Yeah.
So you want to do it in the quickest possible time. So what trainers are you going to run in?
I thought you were going to ask me how we were going to say that. Because we say, well, I've only booked 2 week off work. So I've got to...
Well, we're splitting it up, so don't worry, we've got that covered.
Yeah, so it's the Z60s. I've been training in
the Vimazzi.
Yeah.
The Vimazzi. So Trevor, if he wants to go faster, yours doesn't have a carbon plate in it or anything like that. What's your take on this carbon plate in terms of speed then?
Okay, so really interesting. No one has really nailed why the shoes work. Okay, so the concept is they give you energy return.
Yeah.
It's not possible from physics, right? The energy return they talk about with the materials, when you do material testing, you load the material, how quickly, how efficiently does it get back to where it started, right? It would have to go beyond that to push your foot forward.
Right.
Furthermore, if I take a soft material and press on it,
yeah,
when I take my finger off, it goes back to where it started, but it can't do that till I take my finger off.
Yeah.
So similarly, when you load a soft material, it can't start to go back where it started till you take your heel off it. So it can't give you energy return. The way that a material can help you at heel strike is, the analogy I do is, if imagine you are braking in your car and you could brake over 50 yards or 100 yards, you have to work a lot harder to brake over 100 yards.
Yeah.
Right. So the only way a shoe can help you is, the closer you are to the ground and the harder it is, the harder you have to brake, and you brake using your muscles and tendons to protect your joints.
Yeah.
If you put a soft material underneath the heel, so you make the braking distance further, you take stress off the muscles and therefore off the joints.
Okay.
And it seems intuitive that if you then get less fatigue, when you run with a certain step length. Okay. So you run as longer, is one of the ways to do it. All the studies show that when you fatigue, you run shorter. Well, if you take longer to fatigue, you run longer for longer, right? So maybe that helps. I think as well, the chap who did the study for the 4%, that showed the 4% energy stuff, 2 years later, they repeated the study and they changed the flexibility of the carbon fiber plate, and it made no difference to the energy efficiency. So their conclusion is, it's working in a way that we don't really understand.
Yeah.
What I think it might be, what it definitely does, is it gets you from heel to toe quickly. It gets you through the sagittal plane.
Yeah.
And maybe I've been wondering of late, maybe, when you do start to fatigue and you run shorter, it just helps you get through the foot.
Right. Okay.
Right. And therefore that kind of combined thing, then the overall geometry of the shoe. I think in a nutshell, no one really knows.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think we can refute that it's made people run faster because all the times have come down.
Yeah.
But if you look at all of the carbon fiber shoes, they will have a different shape to the plate. They are different materials above and below, and they will have different geometry overall.
Yeah.
Right. So the secret is finding the one that works for you.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, well, that's got all the publicity, because like our patient who got the second type of shoe couldn't get on with it. I'm sure Adrian would tell you he's tried some and go, I just can't get on with them.
Yeah.
But it's a carbon fiber shoe.
Yeah. Yeah. And have you found that, Adrian? That
yeah, absolutely. Hocker. I bought some Hocker. I think it was a carbon model.
Carbon X.
Yeah.
Are they still the rocker soled?
Yeah. Well, all the carbon fiber shoes have to be rocker soled because they don't flex.
Yeah.
And that's the secret. In theory, first, MTPJ motion is you lose energy.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the concepts is by reducing MTPJ motion by having a rocker sole, you save a little bit of energy.
Right. Okay. So go on.
So the Hock one, I just felt no benefit whatsoever in it, and it was not only proven in the times I was doing my heart rate, and I was just how confused with what the selling angle was to that shoe.
Okay. So you just didn't get on with that. So you said it was a Z60. What was the shoe you're going to run in?
Yeah, so it's the Vamasi Z60.
Have we got
it's just
that one
here?
here? So Trevor, tell me about this shoe then. Just point out the design features on this. I see it's got quite a high heel counter. At the back as well. Would that not be aggravating to someone who's got an Achilles tendon?
Well, it's pretty flexible.
Right.
So it's the contour there is really to hold the heel, and it's got some some thickening around here to hold the heel into a nice place. Yeah. What's really interesting, I never this feature here in terms of the curve for healing. I was chatting with Scott, and literally last night he sent me an email and said, "Oh well, in engineering, when they engineer railway tracks, they have to use a certain type of curve to reduce the stress on the train to give you a comfortable ride. Yeah. And basically, rather than having a circle where the radius of the circle is the same all the way, these curves have a varying radius. And they use the same principle for helter-skelters. Yeah. Because if you don't do that, when you're at the bottom, right, you get loads of G-force. Yeah. And when you're at the top, it needs to be able to go faster. If it didn't go faster, you'd fall out. Right. So they use these curves, right? It's fascinating. So I was literally looking at it, and he said, he's designed that curve along those bases, right? So in order to facilitate the heel to toe. So when we look at, if we took the top off this, you imagine the sole of this shoe as one unit, and then you cut out a unit beneath the ball of the foot and put a firmer material in. Yeah. But when you have a firmer forefoot and a softer rear foot, you have to, if they were the same thickness, you'd end up going into a negative heel. Right. For someone, for most people, that'd be that'd be stretching the Achilles out all the time. So you have to do a calculation to allow the thickness to be able to compress by a certain amount. Right. Right. To prevent that to happen. So there's a thickness of material beneath the heel and a thickness of material beneath the forefoot. Yeah. To prevent that from happening. Right. And the density in this shoe is calculated upon certain forces, and then we do the retro calculation for an individual. So I got a pair of Vamasi shoes off you. So for me, you were asking me certain parameters, what my cadence was, what my how many stride width and all that business. How does that fit with the shoe then? How do you put that together and come up with what model you want? It's interesting. So the amount of force you generate is going to be related to your height, your weight, everybody gets that, your gender. Yeah. Cadence determines how long you spend in the air. Yes. Right? So if you have a fast cadence, so short step length, you spend less time in the air, you generate less force. If you have a slow cadence, you spend more time in the air, you generate more force. Yeah. But also when you run faster, you generate more force, but actually in a horizontal plane. That's why the forefoot bit's so important. And then like most shoes, it's got a rocker on it because that gets you through the sagittal plane and facilitates that toe off. So those criteria all determine about how much force you generate. Yeah. Right. It doesn't mean that you can't wear any of the shoes because they're all designed to do the same sort of thing. But if you're looking to optimize, so you're doing part run or you're doing a couch to 5K, how do you choose what shoe you want? Yeah. I mean, it's a great option because you just say, well, actually, I'm going to be generating these sorts of forces, right? I'll go for that. That's my start point. And as I get better, I can start looking at other models. You might change the model of a Vamasi or you can look at other shoes. whichever takes your fancy. But I think for the first time for me, the reason why I decided to get more involved with it was because it just offers us something that we've never been able to do before. But also, we're talking about running. You treat people with heel pain, right? Plantar fasciitis. This should blow it apart,
right?
So
that's a good shoe for plantar fasciitis.
We've treated people with plantar fasciitis, midfoot RA, ankle OA, medial tibial stress zone, patellofemoral pain, hip pain, right? Because it's balancing the forces and allowing things to do. So if it's an option for people,
right? In
anything we do, there are responders and non-responders, right? So you get some people put the shoe on, just don't get on with it.
So it's quite a jazzy shoe, mind. So it's quite a jazzy looking shoe.
Yeah.
So how does that fit with, your average plantar fasciitis patient and what they might be wearing?
Well,
do you have neutral colours and?
Well, there's a walking shoe.
Right. Okay.
Right, which is black.
So you have got other options.
There is a black walking shoe, which is suitable for some people. I mean, I wear it. I thought it was going to be too soft for me, but it's not.
Right.
I wouldn't go walking up a mountain in it.
Yeah.
Right. And you can consider it as a recovery shoe. So some of my plantar heel pain patients have gone for the walking shoe. This might interest you as well. I just recently, first post-op bunion, put them into a pair.
Right, okay.
Right, because you've got really soft upper, and it allows the movement. They're quite wide at the front.
And big game changer, big difference.
Oh, it made my surgery so much better. She was happy.
She was delighted with it. So the Run 3D then, Joe, does that gather this sort of data then? The cadence and all. And do you get all of that information to be able to plug into it? So that's something you'll be able to do and provide this kind of footwear.
Yes. So I've got Run 3D in my clinic, and so cadence and we're basically looking at how all the joints in the body are moving. So we put these sensors on and we can see exactly how the whole of the lower half of the body is moving in all three planes of motion.
Yeah.
And what I do after that is I do a whole load of strength and flexibility testing as well. So we're putting this really big picture together, and then add in the force plate testing as well. And we're just getting this huge amount of data, which means the treatment pathway, which may include orthotics, but it's probably going to include a rehabilitation plan as well, and maybe some gait retraining as well. So it just brings the whole bigger picture.
I suppose that's always the thing with any sort of clinical pathology as well, as in it's never just one thing. I think patients, when they come to you, they say, I've tried that and I've tried the other and I've tried, but you need to put it together as a package. The shoe is as important as their running style, the rehabilitation that you do, the therapy that you give them in terms of exercise and strength and rehabilitation. It's all part of it. You can't just say change one thing and that will make all the difference.
I think people come to me and they think I've got a magic wand. It's I'm sure you get the same, and it isn't like that. You have to put all the jigsaw pieces together to create that picture, to create that treatment plan that's going to work for that individual person.
So people have to put the effort in themselves as well, in terms of rehabilitation. Okay, so in terms of your run then, Adrian, so I mean it's a big event to put on as well. What sort of support have you got behind you? I know we're supporting you from a medical point of view. What does it take to put on this sort of event?
It's a lot of planning. There's the logistics of it is the biggest headache. So we've got a project manager doing that. A lot of patience from my wife. Because we spoke about it and then suddenly it happened overnight. But just the training wise as well, because you've got to be out there and uncomfortable. And I did a lot of training in the peaks as well, just to make sure.
So you're doing different terrains, different you're doing hill training and things to get more endurance. Is that what you're kind of doing?
Yeah. So a combination of all terrains, hill training, intervals, because intervals are so important. And I found it a little bit bizarre that the goal was just to run the endurance, but my coach was insistent that I keep up with the interval training, because to have that pace and to use your fast and slow twitch muscles during the session, if you like, is still so important. Because I mean, I'm not a doctor like you guys, but when you're starting to fatigue, having strong muscles for the strength and condition is important as well. Plays a big part in it at the latter stages of the challenge.
So does your training regime involve strength training as well as just going out and running distances then?
Yeah, so especially when I were injured, I mean, if I'm going to miss one session off, and a lot of runners do this, it is the strength and conditioning one. Mondays, every Monday, I feel like, I've done a long run on a Sunday. I don't really want to do this one, but I made it my mission to continue doing that every Monday, especially when I got injured. And I genuinely believe that had a contribution factor to recovering quicker than what I should have done.
Yeah. Who have you got on your team then? Who's backing you up in terms of the overall logistics of it?
We've got a chiropractor, Tom Richardson, who's coming along.
He's Doncaster chiropractor.
He's works up actually. He's a keen cyclist and also a good runner. So he's going to be on bike support along with a guy called John May who's going to do bike support. So during that process, I will have 2 people on the bike alongside with me. So we've got Craig Baines, who's a sports massage and therapy. He also does diet plans, so he's going to look after the food side of it, make sure that my muscles are recovering in the right way. And I think as well as you guys and my wife, and it's a bare bones sort of squad, but we'll have people I've invited to run along with me. My friends are going to come on a few days, so we'll always have a few people there at our disposal because I need somebody to moan at during the process. That's the most important part.
You're gonna need that. And what are you doing in terms of fundraising then? Because you got this 100k target you want to hit. Well, how are you doing that? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, so we're at, I know it sounds like a long way off, but we're at a couple of thousand now, but we are literally throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it. So we're in the process of getting raffle prizes. So we're going to raise some additional funds by doing a raffle. So we've got some really good prizes. We've got a signed Nigel Benn boxing photo. We've got like the Nest, which is a home management system. We've got some trainers, some PT set. We've got loads of prizes. So we're going to do that alongside it. We're just.
Have you got kind of a good Just Giving page and things like that, or?
Yep. So we've got the Just Giving page. We are doing it all on Just Giving, so you can actually take part in the virtual event.
Right. So you're doing a virtual event alongside this. How does that work then?
So you set your goal. So we're not asking everybody to go and run 832 miles a year, because it doesn't seem, for me, it seems like that's a couple of months training, but so you can set your goal. So if you want to just do 200 miles for the year, you can do that. And what we'll do, you'll get the same event shirt and you'll also get a medal. So you set the goal, sign up to it. I'll give you all the details so you can show people. Yeah. And that's another thing we do in the virtual one.
Because you run your training partner brand. Is it all part of that? Is it on Facebook under that name?
Yeah. So Your Training Partner is a Facebook group. Yeah. So we've got 3,500 members of it now. Right, so okay. It was originally founded to help people to remove the barriers to sports. Yeah. So a lot of people was interested in running and wanted to not to do it alone, especially women. So I can remember the conversation in the garage I had with my wife, and she'd started running probably like a year since now. And during the winter period, she'd stopped running. I said, well, why you stop running outside? Because she did it on a treadmill. Said, you don't know what it's like to be a woman. Yeah. And I said, what do you mean? Says, surely, no, we don't feel safe. We get echoed. I said, well, that's fine. I'll run with you. Yeah. That was like a red rag double. Yeah. I'm not running with you. Everything's a race. And she said that. So I said, well, I'll find you a training partner. So that's how it was born.
Right. And okay.
Huge community. And I do lean on them an awful lot to help with the fundraising. And we put on free sessions. So tonight there's one at 6 p.m. We did a 6 a.m. session this morning. Part run get-togethers. We do a free session on a Monday, which tends to get around 30 to 40 people.
That's good.
So it's all free stuff. So in return, I sometimes ask them to donate a prize.
Yeah, well, why not? Why not?
Yeah, that's Your Training Partner.
So when is the run planned for, Adrian?
It's the 18th of May this year. Yep. 6 a.m. start.
6 a.m. start.
Bright and early. The early bird catches the worm and all that.
Yeah. Well, we'll make sure we're there for you. Don't worry.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks very much for joining us. I wish you all the best, and I'm sure we will get through this. So thanks very much, Adrian. And thanks, guys. You've really opened my eyes again to running shoes and where things are going and just the biomechanics of running. It's absolutely fascinating. And certainly if anybody wants to get any further advice, I mean, where would we get hold of you, Joe?
So you can find me the lakesorthotics.co.uk is my website. I'm on Instagram as well as the Lakes Retford. Or you can find me through the Coriel group as well. Fantastic. You find me online. And although we don't want to send people down to you, Trevor, in London necessarily, well, whereabouts are you based? How could people get hold of you?
So I'm City of London.
Yeah,
good old City of London.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a freeman of the City of London.
Are you really? What does that actually mean then?
Well, you can take sheep across London Bridge, and if I get caught drunk, they'll put me over the borders.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it's something I did during lockdown because I was able to. But so City of London, London Essex borders, Essex. Yeah. So Premier Podiatry is my podiatry business, and then Vermazzi.run is the website, and we have Instagram.
And people can contact you remotely about the Vermazzi.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, if you just either via the website or info@vermazzi.run. Okay. And we're happy to provide any info they want.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.